I see a lot of people are really love from the community, and so I see a lot of you listening to us. So hopefully you are really enjoying so far the sessions. Even though that Andy was before me, and he said that his session was not that very advanced and with this wow effect, still I feel this pressure on my neck because there was so awesome speakers before. But hopefully the adaptive cards topic is something that no one covered yet. I don't think so. And luckily for this session, I got some upgrades in my environment, so I will be able as well to share some new upcoming features that are well coming to Power Automate in regards to adaptive cards. Well, sorry, that's not the best way to start. Okay, so just few words about me. I'm Tomasz Poszytek from Warsaw in Poland. As Andy said as well, don't try to spell my last name if you're not from Poland or at least Eastern Europe, because that's really hard. I do know how to write down the spelling in English, so I can post it in the chat later, so you can at least try to spell it correctly. However, it's really hard. I'm Microsoft Business Applications MVP. I'm also quite active community member and yes, a speaker and blogger. And as well, I'm working on Microsoft technologies for quite a time. It's over 10 years already. The Power Platform was the first time I started with Power Automate Flow back then was nearly 4 years ago, or maybe even over 4 years ago. But anyway, I specialize in processes. I was doing processes way before Flow arrived with SharePoint Designer with Nintex. And so this journey continues. If you're interested in what I'm working on, what I am, who's that? Daniel? No, that's not. Oh, yeah. Anyway, then I encourage you to follow me on my Twitter, or as well look up my blog posts. There is always something interesting to read. Next thing that I want to share is if you have any tweets to share, please tag them with the Automate Saturday hashtag. And last thing I wanted to share with you is that there are 2 upcoming events in Poland second half of this year. Hopefully we'll have enough stable situation. We will be able to make them in person. So first SPS Warsaw, the 5th edition on 12th of September. And then there is also going to be the 365 Saturday Warsaw on 3rd of October. And that 365 Saturday is going to be half divided between Power Platform and Dynamics topics. So this is something new that haven't been yet, I think, on Polish community roadmap. So if you're from Poland, or if you're watching it from Poland or from closest neighborhood, then if everything goes correct, we'll have those events in person. Okay, so without further notice, let's jump onto the presentation. So first, I'll just tell you about the story behind, then briefly just go through message cards. Then I'll stop at adaptive cards, what this technology is about, how to use it, and I'll show you some cool demos. And then I'll talk about the future and what can we expect from the nearest future as well. Yeah, or what is already available, but not for everyone because, for example, Teams is not implementing that. Wow. So when you as a user of community portals or community applications look at the content, we can clearly name the particular areas in the interface that somehow can be named as a tiles, as a components that are displaying differently on different hosts. However, they still carry the same kind of information. So, for example, if you have the YouTube video, you can post it on message in Twitter, maybe not Twitter, but you can post it in Messenger. And then if you open the same message on your mobile phone or on your computer or in, I know, messenger.com website, then there is still this YouTube video, however, like encapsulated in a different UI. So this is something that we called a card, basically. And in the end, the cards are just the technology that is used to help us display the content in this host experience. So in the end, we don't have to actually focus on the UI or the UX in this meaning. We just need to focus on how to grab this content, how to put it together and post it. And then the host actually is displaying this content, packaging it to meet its own user experience. So how this history of adaptive cards actually started in Microsoft. In 2016, Microsoft realized that they have actually a couple of teams working in different branches, but basically on the same technology. So they had Windows team working on live tiles. They had a bot framework team working on sort of bot cards. They had Exchange team working on actionable messages. And they realized that, okay, so if all those teams are working actually on the same technology, why do they need to be split? Let's merge them and let's create just a unified technology that can be shared across those technologies, across those consumers. And later in 2017, there was a team created that is today led still by Matt Hidinger and David Glow. And in just 2017, they have announced the first, the 1.0 version of message cards, which was a successor of actionable messages. And just in a year later, they've created and published, it was, I think, in June 2018, the adaptive cards version 1.0. So they did quite a lot in just a year, to be honest. So who are those, let's say, heroes of this story? So first, Matt Hidinger. He joined Microsoft just, I think, like months before. I mean, a couple of months before setting up the team. So in 2017. Before then, he was working as a dev lead, overseeing delivery of mobile apps for high consumer profile brands. And so with that experience, he learned how to create software or how to create interfaces that were consumable, that were attractive for the end users, for the business users. And he brought this knowledge and now is sharing and using this around adaptive cards. He's also quite a community animal. He's trying to speak at user groups, meetups. He's also running and he's running the community meetups around the adaptive cards each second Thursday of the month. And well, he's also sharing a lot of his knowledge and projects on GitHub. And then the second person is David Glow, who is working for Microsoft for a decade, nearly, for over 14 years. And for all his history before he joined the adaptive cards team, he was working for Exchange teams. So for example, he's the author of EWS Managed API. And then once he joined Adaptive Cards team, he is, for example, the creator of the AdaptiveCards.io designer. So this JavaScript designer, the drag and drop and designer that I will show you, is something that he built. And he's not on social media. He has been disconnected from social media for some reasons. All right. So what is special about the cards built by the Microsoft, actually? First of all, as I said, this is the technology that is actually being natively rendered on the platform that is using the SDK. The contents are being automatically adapted to user experience of that host. And thanks to that, this technology is somehow low cost because you don't have to actually create a separate layout or separate composition of the content per each host where you want to display. So you don't have to create one content layout for mobile, one for desktop, and so on. You just focus on the content, and then it's just being displayed accordingly. And thanks to its purely declarative approach, how the content is being, let's say, declared, defined or created. So this is just a JSON. And the fact that the parser, when trying to display the content, is simply following the schema of the JSON, this technology is also extremely secure because you just can't put anything that is behind or beyond or not in the schema defined, because simply it won't be rendered or will be rendered just a plain text. So there is no way someone can inject a malicious code into the adaptive card. Okay, what's more, the schema is extensible. So this is Adaptive Cards is simply an open source project. So if you're a developer and you want to create your own application using SDK, using Adaptive Cards in your solution, then simply need to grab an SDK and put it into your solution. And what's more, you can extend the schema. So if you need some specific functionalities or specific layouts or specific support for something that is not present in a schema created by Microsoft, then simply you can just add new definitions and support this. Cards are not only used for displaying content, they're also used for interaction. So they do have actions for submitting data, for showing, for opening URLs, for toggling parts of data. They also have input fields so that you can create forms to grab data back from the user and then process it in your application. And then also from the very first day the technology was created, they support accessibility, so they are compliant with all those text-to-speech applications. So also cards can be read and used by the people with vision disabilities, for example. Cool. If you have any questions, by the way, I will make short gaps. Maybe I'll ask even if there are any questions. But if not, please you can try to verbally ask them, or Daniel, if you see some very pending urgent questions in the chat, you can as well ask them. I'm not monitoring the chat right now. Sorry. So anyway, now I'm jumping into the message cards topic. So the message cards, as said, this was a technology that originated from actionable messages. So they took all the best functionalities and they created this new functionality. However, today this technology is currently marked as an obsolete. So there is also information that if you can, please migrate to adaptive cards, because this technology is no longer being developed, no longer being supported, to be honest. But still we can use it. One of the greatest features that adaptive cards still don't have is the possibility to post a message card to Microsoft Teams via the webhooks, which is kind of fancy thing for me. The message cards layout or the schema was quite simple. It was always built out of the header or the title of the card, and then there were sections. Each section could be and can be still built only from the section's activity. Some containers for the text and for facts, and that's it. There was like nothing more. Maybe there was an image as well. And then if you wanted to multiply, for example, the texts, but to be in a separate blocks, then you had to actually multiply the sections. And always at the bottom, always below the contents, there was a area to put actions. So the buttons to toggle cards, to open URLs, to submit cards, and so on. It was really simple. Now, I am not actually going to jump into the demo about the message cards, because this is something that possibly none of us is going to use anymore. If you're interested in how this can work, just ping me and I can show you. So I want to jump on to adaptive cards right now. The adaptive cards as a technology, this is something that, well, originated from message cards, on the other hand. So again, it inherits all the best functionalities, all the best features from message cards. However, its schema is different, so you can't simply put the JSON code of message card and paste it in an action, for example, in Flow to post an adaptive card to Teams, because it will not work. There are slight and small differences between those two schemas. However, this is the technology that is still living. So this is being developed, this is being extended, this is technology that Microsoft is very intensively working on. And it has a more advanced schema, it has more actions, its SDK is actually now available in the most of the open source platforms and in the most of the communication software that is built by Microsoft. Right. So as I said, when we're thinking about adaptive cards as a developers or us as users, we can actually meet this technology in most of those applications Microsoft is creating for communication. So like Outlook, Teams, Azure Bot Framework, and soon, hopefully this year, also in Power Virtual Agents, also in Cortana skills on in Windows Timeline. Everywhere there, we are able to post and to see adaptive cards used to display content. Plus, the SDK for adaptive cards is available for any common development platform. Also, it has been created. Also, the SDK has been created for Flutter and React Native, and it was actually created not by the Microsoft itself. It was done by the community around adaptive cards. So there was just a group of programmers who took the SDK and they adopted it to be available for Flutter and React Native. That's really cool. And now, when speaking about adaptive cards, how their schema is looking like, it is a little bit more advanced. So this is a picture that shows how the schema looks actually for the version 1.0. But version 1.1 and 1.2, that is today the latest published version, the major difference around the composition is that the actions that are here present, the actions, they can be actually put anywhere in the content. There is a container called an action set, where you can put buttons, for example, in the middle of, between the two text blocks and so on. But basically, still in adaptive card, we can name two major areas, the body, so where all contents are present, and the actions. In body, we can write text, we can put actions sets, we can put fact sets. So for example, this one present here, we can put column sets, which somehow emulates a table because you can just create columns and then put data inside. We have image set that is dedicated to display images like in a gallery. We have also input fields for text values for, the radio buttons, the checkboxes, drop downs. So there is quite a huge number of all these components that we can use to create adaptive card. Now, how do we actually do that? How do we actually create an adaptive card? The first place that we should always knock on is adaptivecards.io/designer. So this is where you should always go first to start creating your own adaptive card. However, if you're a developer, there is also an app studio in Teams. So you can visualize an adaptive card inside a Teams app studio. There is as well an adaptive cards visualizer for Visual Studio Code. So again, once you start authoring a card in Visual Studio, you can see how it looks like. There is WPF visualizer if you're doing software for Windows. There is still the message cards playground where you can see how the message cards are being done. And if you're trying to send adaptive cards or actionable messages to Microsoft Exchange, to Outlook actually, there is a very useful tool that is called Actionable Messages Debugger for Outlook that actually helps you to preview the communication between the server and the card. So if there's something not working, you can check where the contents are being lost, for example, where the communicate is not working. So Adaptive Cards Designer, that's it, is a tool that I said was created by David Clow. And this is actually a place or a software that you can use to build your adaptive card using this drag and drop approach. So if you're somehow familiar with what you see is what you get interfaces, then this is quite easy to follow. It doesn't require a lot of adoption. And then for each control you put, you can define its properties. Then just please be aware that for some hosts, this SDK is not being supported the same way. So even though the latest available SDK is 1.2, and this 1.2 is working fully, is fully supported in bot framework, for example, for Microsoft Teams. Although Microsoft Teams already has implemented 1.2, it is not actually supporting all the elements, for example. If you're trying to put the media, which allows you to play video right from the card, that is not yet working in Microsoft Teams. If you'd like to use conditional branches, so if you'd like to make some conditions, which controls should be displayed when, that is something that as well not work in Microsoft Teams yet. But hopefully, once the connector between Power Automate and Teams is not in a preview anymore, then this integration, this support will as well be changed to cover all the functionalities. All right, now I am about to jump to the demos. So if you have any questions, that's the right moment to ask. No.
I don't see any yet, so yeah.
I have one, Thomas.
Okay.
Can you do adaptive cards with any of the JavaScript framework like React or Angular or Vue?
Yes, you can. So that's what I said. So once you, let me just show you this slide. Where's this button? Sorry. Hello. So there is a JavaScript SDK as well present. Let me just do one thing. I'll grab out a presenter. Maybe this will help to navigate on the screen. No, that was here. So, sorry. Where was this slide? Come on. All right. So there is an SDK for JavaScript as well. So you can actually take the Adaptive Card SDK and really put it in your application, and then you can write application in PHP, for example, as a backend, so to communicate with the server. But then in interface, you can actually utilize JavaScript and Adaptive Cards SDK, and even more, you can extend this SDK, so you can put your own definitions for your own behavior of the adaptive card. Okay.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. I missed that before. So thanks.
No problems. We are here to answer all the questions. Okay. So right now I'll jump to the demo. So the first demo I wanted to show is about invoices processing actually, and the invoices approval. So instead of doing a regular old-fashioned workflow where you have a task and the Power Automate tasks or whatever else task, and you have just to switch between all the systems, I decided to create a much easier solution. The input is just a Power App application that is being used to scan the invoice, but that can be as well done using the incoming emails. The point is that in the background, there is an AI builder trained to recognize those particular invoices, to recognize fields in those invoices, and then to get out of the data. So basically, once a user that is a different user than I am is having a new invoice, and once the invoice is recognized, so now you can see that it is being analyzed by the AI builder, and there are specific areas recognized with some with some percentage of the confidence. But what I want from this processing is the total value, the bill to contact, and the due date, I think. So everything that I wanted to grab out of this invoice is working. The next step of this processing of this process actually is an approval of the manager or from someone from the accountancy team. So what is going to happen next once a user hits the send for approval is that the contents of this invoice will be sent to a channel, let's say accountancy channel, where then anyone from the team can actually review the contents of this invoice and then express their approval or rejection. So let me just hit this send for approval and switch back to the second screen. Where already this card should be generated and present. And there is a channel that is called the cards test. And there are some new, okay. So there is a new card already generated with all the details, as you can see, from the invoice that has been previously scanned. The advantage of this approach is that actually the person who is now going to accept or reject this invoice is not actually required or requested to now navigate away from their digital workplace, so the teams where they are working, where they have the conversation, where they have the files and contents, to a different system to check if this invoice is there, what is the value, what are the parameters, because everything they need to justify, to verify this invoice is actually present here. What can be as well done as well, of course, is that there can be a button that could navigate a user to the source document so they can compare, they can review. But actually, with all the information, they are already able to say if they approve this or reject. So let me just say and simply approve this button. Approve this invoice. So you can see there is a general researcher as the requester, and then me was the approver. So the point is, with this simple approach, we can actually make the process of approving invoices or any other documents or any kind of the process that requires an approval and a review of the content much faster, because we don't ask or request the user to navigate between systems and like to complete the full view on the item that is being approved on their own. Now, how was this flow actually created? So let me just refresh this, the runs history. Yeah, I know there is this button to refresh it, but I forgot it for the moment. So anyway, once user hits the submit for approval button in Power Apps, it actually triggers this flow. And then what it does, it also passes all the information that is already recognized and taken out of the document by the AI builder. So I don't need to actually call the AI builder again in the flow. I could, but I don't have to because this is already done on Power Apps side. And then what I'm really missing so far is a better way to actually create a dynamic values in Power Automate in regards of adaptive cards. So because I wanted to create this table, right? I wanted to create table showing the rows, the positions from the invoice. I actually had to concatenate them on my own. So I did this loop that was for each row adding a new value to the variable. And then someone in the end, I had a complete adaptive card code with all the data, with all the details that was ready for being published. So what I did next, I used this new action called post an adaptive card to a Teams channel and wait for the response. So with the January release of the new features, the new functionalities in Power Automate, we were given two new actions. The first one is the one you can see here. The second one was post an adaptive card to a Teams user and wait for the response. The huge advantage of this action is that before then, we had only two actions to post adaptive cards Teams. That's correct. But with that actions, we were not able to grab the response. We were not able to put a form inside adaptive card and then grab the data out of the form, because the Flowbot, that is a host in this term, was not programmed, configured to actually know how to handle the response, how to handle the post message. What is important in adaptive cards is that we can't define the target for posting data. We can only define target for opening URLs, but post is always getting first to the host, and then the host actually have to handle this request, for example, to process it and send further to any other third system. So with these two new actions, we're actually now able to post a Teams, adaptive card to Teams and wait for the response and get this response and then work on this response, like in this case here. But as said, what I'm missing is this possibility to actually make this whole processing a little bit more easier and dynamic. Now, the second thing I wanted to show you about the new features that are coming up for adaptive cards is a new trigger that is called for a selected message. So that's something you can't find yet in a regular environment. It is only able today at the preview environment, but possibly will be rolling out somewhere this month or maybe next month, so you'll be as well able to play. This trigger is actually used to bind logic to a message in Teams, in private conversation in Teams, and help you display an adaptive card to do some actions. Plus, it already have this new layout or the new approach for generating or crafting adaptive card built in. So what you also will see in the nearest future is that the actions for creating adaptive card and posting it to Teams will not be as today. So they will not be just, they will not have just an input field called message where you have to put all the JSON code, but instead of the message field, they will have this button, edit adaptive card, that will simply open a designer built-in right in Power Automate. So that's really cool. This will save a lot of work and efforts to create and then, well, develop adaptive cards. So that's really cool. Now, in this case, I'm showing you what I want to do with this selected message is to actually let a user to report this message or request its deletion, or maybe to send a copy. This is just an MVP showing how this trigger works. So the scenarios are not yet fully supported. For example, deletion of the message. But let me show you how that actually works. So here I have the John Researcher's message. Now what I can do is simply open this context menu, and here under More Actions, you can find this new option or this new name of a flow. So once you create flows triggered by that trigger, so for the selected message, you will notice them here under More Actions. The more flows you create, the more options you will see here. Once this solution is released in public tenants or in not preview tenants, it will be only working in the default environment for the first round, but hopefully later this will be enhanced so that you'll be able to create those flows in any environment in your tenant. Now, what is happening once I hit this button is actually displaying me the adaptive card I have created. So you can actually use it for any kind of, well, if you want to support some policies, if you want to handle some privacy nodes or any kind of other regulation that you have in your company around the contents that users are creating, or any kind of other logic that you would like to implement for the existing messages or private communication that is not out of the box in Teams, but you can try to handle it using Flow. So in this case, I like to report it. So I don't know, it abuses me. And submit. Now, what is actually just happening in the back is simply the flow being triggered, and it follows the logic is being defined inside the flow. So I have requested, or I have created that in case of the message being reported, it is actually generating another adaptive card to a Teams administrator that is sent a card, again, a request, with the details about the reported message. So I have the information, who reported the message, why, who is the author of the message. Maybe sometime in the future, there will be as well the possibility to display in a very straightforward way, not only the channel ID, but the channel name. And there is also the contents of the message. Plus, I have this option to open the message, which, as you can see, is highlighted. So I ad hoc knows what are we talking about. Plus, I'm as well able to make those other activities or other actions that that the designer of the card let me to do. So unfortunately, deletion of the message is not yet possible using Graph API or any other API, even the beta one. I checked it today because it's the first day I can play with this new functionality. But if, for example, this message was reported for a deletion, then actually, if you're a Teams admin, you can just, where was it? You can actually just go and delete the message yourself. So that's the kind of a support that you can provide for the users. Right. And confirm. Now, what you can see, or what you saw right now, was that once I hit this confirm button, or once I submitted the card, it has been replaced by not so good looking new card. This behavior is built in. This is a configuration of the action that actually lets me to, okay, I'll just jump to the edit mode. So that once I use this action to post to Teams user or to Teams admin or to Teams channel, I can then as well choose whether to update a message and then replace the existing contents with a new one. Unfortunately, I can't send a new adaptive card to replace the existing one, but at least I am able somehow to show the confirmation. All right, so that was the second demo, and what I want to talk about right now is a templating service. Because as I said to you about this first demo on sending invoices, I was somehow annoyed that I had to create this for each loop, then to concatenate the contents of the card per each row. That was a kind of a huge amount of work I had to do. And I didn't like it, to be honest. So instead, we can use in our own systems, because it doesn't yet work for adaptive cards in Teams, the adaptive cards templating. Now, this functionality actually helps us to create templates of adaptive cards and then fuel them with the data. So you can just create placeholders in adaptive cards. You can use loops, you can use rules like if-else rules, you can use formatting, you can use conditions and so on. And then simply, once you put a data, you bind a data with a template, the adaptive card gets automatically created and filled with the data. So like in the case I showed you, if I had a table data, I could only define a template for the one row, and this template would be multiplied for multiple rows. So let me show you how I would like it to be working, and this will be working one day for adaptive cards in Teams as well. So you already remember this card, right? This was the card that was sent for the invoices. Now note that in this scenario, I don't have any of the data hard-coded inside the contents. I just have those placeholders. Plus I have my table where a single row is just having those variables as well defined. I have as well some fields that have rules like this one here, so that it should be only visible if, where it is, if the value is above 5,000, there is also small built-in rule inside this field to format it differently based on the value. And now what I have to do to make it all work is to simply provide a data. So this is a data scope here, but actually in the end, you'll be able to just pass in as an input, for example, parameter in the action in Power Automate. And once this is all sent to the host gets the data, binds with the card, merges it, and display it. And in the end, this will look like this, for example. So I don't actually have to create the for each loop. I don't have to concatenate these values on my own. This will be done by the host, just on the data. And the JSON actually, because the data is also in a JSON format, is nearly the same that AI Builder is returning. So I don't have to really do a lot of work to make this all working if this is all supported. How do you like it? That's really cool, huh?
Thomas, I see a question in the chat. Yeah. Is adaptive cards templating general available, preview, or roadmap?
No, the adaptive cards templating is going to be available later this year. So the team is still working to make it general available. I think this will be published very soon after the build. So if you're interested in the technology, be sure to join build and the watch sessions, because Matt promised to announce a cool new features and the roadmap. So yeah, today it is not supported, but he said that hopefully after the build, they will make it just GA, and this will hopefully as well make the actions GA. So maybe the team will also implement it fully on their side.
Okay, great.
Now, one more thing about the templating, because what I showed you was a templating language. We also have something that is called a templating service in adaptive cards. This is a solution that actually is built on GitHub. So in GitHub, we have a repository with a templates created by the Microsoft or by the community. And actually, we can call this templating service using the endpoint URL. And what is happening is that once we call this endpoint, providing our data as a JSON, so just the data, then the templating service is actually using LUIS, so the Language Understanding Intelligence Service, reviewing this templating repository if there is any template matching that set of data. So for example, once you jump into Microsoft Graph, the version of Graph that used to be previewed just a week ago, today is already available. So this is the new view of the Microsoft Graph Explorer. And if I go and, for example, display my profile data, it's just a JSON. But now there is a new feature here, adaptive cards. So now once I hit it, you see this fetching. It was a moment where adaptive card templating service was querying Luis to get and grab the best matching template. And so it is. So now imagine you have your data, you don't have a template actually, but you can call the templating service and you get the template in response and you can just display it, and that's done. Maybe one day you will also be able to have your own repositories, like company repositories, where you can create and build adaptive cards using the company brandings and other guidelines, and then use them internally. But well, that are just the cool features on the roadmap or in the backlog. Okay, so I have still a couple of minutes. So just a few words. About what we can expect from the nearest future. So what I said in the beginning is that we have currently the version 1.2 released. Team is working on version 1.3. Not all the hosts that have the SDK implemented are fully supporting what is available in version 1.2. Hopefully this will change. With version 1.1 and 1.2, one of the coolest features we can use is are the media support, so this availability or the possibility to play videos and music directly from the card. This is also the base64 image support, because today you can only provide, I mean, in version 1.0, you're only able to provide images via their absolute URLs. And then if you wanted, for example, to get an image from SharePoint, and the session that was used for Teams was not logged into a SharePoint, then obviously user would see just a 404 image not existing, or 401 no access to the image. But you can today as well provide the image via the base64. Just note that the bigger image is, the bigger this base64 string is going to be, so the heavier the card is going to be in the end. But that is something you have to, let's say, discuss internally. There is also the ability to put inline functions. So for example, as you saw, to show or hide part of a data based on the values from different parts of the data of the card, and as well the basic data validation. With version 1.3, what is coming sometime later this year, or later, we will have a unified HTTP action. So today, if you want to create a get action or post action or toggle action, you have to choose between 4 options. And desired functionality is just to have a single action and then configure it accordingly. We'll also have a more advanced input validations using as well regular expressions and patterns. So this is also going to make the cards more useful, especially speaking about the forms and users' input. And hopefully we'll also have the productive release of all the team's actions in Power Automate and full support of adaptive cards SDK and templating language in Teams. Now, parallelly to version 1.3, there is a thing like a backlog code, where the team is just gathering all the ideas they would like to realize sometime, somewhere in the future. That is called the vNext version 2.0. And this is where the templating language is stored, where it is being developed. And once it is ready to be GA, it will just come out from this vNext solution and be brought to 1.3. There are also more advanced scopes like binding scope, data scopes. So speaking about the binding scopes, which is also a part of a templating language, this is a feature or a functionality that helps you to bind, for example, to the adaptive cards definition, a device scope. So once you get a device scope into the adaptive cards code, you can display, for example, information about the device that is hosting the adaptive card, like the OS version, browser version. Plus, with the conditions that gives you templating language, you can display the same card differently on iOS or Android, because you know what is the host, you know the information about the host, so you can actually handle that. Speaking about extensibility, one of the coolest features that you also can find in documentation is the possibility to use adaptive cards, to use Microsoft UI Fabric inside adaptive cards. So if you don't like, for some reason, the adaptive cards icons or look and feel, you can always extend the schema and use UI Fabric. For example, if you're creating your own application for Windows or for online solutions, you can grab the SDK, use UI Fabric, and simply make it to look even more natively than it could look if you were just following the built-in SDK. Wow, I hope it wasn't too fast. It's a lot of content as well. If you're interested in what's coming up in adaptive cards, then you can go into the ak.ms/AC roadmap, and this will open you this adaptive cards features product board site, where you can actually find information about the new and the very future upcoming functionalities and solutions. There is also this backlog that shows what is still under consideration, what can be maybe implemented one day in the future. So this is the starting point. Also, if you're interested in just getting the latest news, there is a webpage called ak.ms AC community call that will download you the ICS file, and we have calls every second Thursday of the month. So it's 9 a.m. I think Pacific time, so not that very much late even for Central Eastern Europe. And actually that's it from my side. So thank you very much for your presence, for listening to me. If you want to write me, if you want to follow me, here are all links from all the community platforms and social channels I am available at. So don't hesitate to ask. And I hope that one day we can really meet again in person on the in-person conference. So once again, thank you very much.
And thank you, Tomasz. Really nice.
Wow.
I really liked the session. And a lot of people also did, if I look at the comments. There was one question. Does GitHub URL for slide and code shared in conversations? Oh, I don't really know what.
So the GitHub URL for I do have somewhere, I think, here stored a GitHub URL for the templates.
Okay. I think that
here it is.
he probably wants to have that URL. So can you share it in the chat?
So the other URLs are.
I think that that's what he wants. Okay. Are there any other questions for Tomasz? Because he's here now. So make sure to ask something you want to ask now. Okay, what version of adaptive cards does Outlook support at the moment?
So there is another site that is called Adaptive Cards Partners. Oh, I remember that.
Wow.
Where you can actually see what is the version. So let me just copy paste it again. And you can see what is the latest version available for each platform. So for Outlook does not actually support adaptive cards as adaptive cards. It is still actionable messages, which is fairly close to adaptive cards. They still have a slightly different schema, and the team is also working. That's especially a job of David Clow. They're still working on making this all consistent, so that this is really going to be just a single schema, single technology, but still this is actionable messages that you should use for Outlook. And unfortunately, the version 1.0, so not that fancy. The most updated is bot framework. So if you're doing bots, you can really do awesome things with adaptive cards. Plus, the funny thing, or maybe the interesting thing, is that also Cisco WebEx Teams is using adaptive cards because they found it very useful for their purposes and for the content creation.
That's cool. There's also
Clifton.
Yeah, there's a question by Clifton.
Right. So this adaptive cards management system, that's something that was created by the interns during summer internship. For where do I have this? Just open. Let me open the. Clifton is speaking about these, where was it? Clifton, oh, card author services. So this is something that Clifton was speaking about. So the interns were working on like a technology that could be provisioned internally in a companies. That is like a source or digital workspace where different teams can author their cards, they can version it, they can share them between each other, they can then, and this can be then used as an adaptive cards service, templating service. So you can call it then internally, and this should return you an adaptive card published, the latest version for the specific purpose. And I don't know if this will ever be really published, that, you know, us as a consumers will be able to grab it and provision to our own premises. Maybe one day, let's see.
I would love to see it.
It was showcased during the community call. So if you're there is information. So if you're interested how it's working, how it's looking like, then just watch the community call from March, and the team was showcasing what they built during the internship.
Yeah, really cool. I think that a lot of customers would love this.
So Clifton, back to your question, this adaptive card management system is meant to be something like that, but there is no date for this to be published.
Okay.
But Clifton, you can always build your own repository, like using CDS, for example, or SQL. So that's nothing really, let's say, complex to create a repository of a templates.
Okay, there was one more question about Outlook on Mac will support that. I think that you already answered that with the partner.
Yes,
partner
and
link.
I don't remember this URL, but basically the support for actionable messages in Outlook is not only based on the version of the application itself. There is also a prerequisite of some policies on a tenant level. So even if you have the latest version of Outlook and someone sends you an adaptive card, so the actionable message to your Outlook, and it is not displayed as an actionable message, it means that I can't recall this information, but there is a prerequisite, not even related to actually the app version, but to the tenant settings.
So you can probably disable that as a tenant admin if you want.
Somehow, yes. Maybe I'll find it somewhere, but I really...
Okay. No worries there. Serge, Dr. Flo, is asking about download from marketplace policy. What exactly do you mean with that, Serge?
Serge, speak out loud.
Yeah, you can also unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Hello, how are you? I'm the next speaker, so that's a privilege.
Okay, to allow adaptive cards.
I was wondering about the adaptive card. Indeed, the policy, I wonder if it's not the allow download for marketplace or something like that.
I don't remember, you know.
My customer has the same issue, so they need to apply this policy, even though they have the latest version of Outlook, indeed. Something like that.
Or maybe I have somewhere this hyperlink store that tells what is required, but really, I have so many hyperlinks. I need to somehow organize them better. But yes, it is not just it's not only related to the version of the Outlook app.
Okay, but apart from that, the Outlook on Mac currently only supports actionable messages, probably, just like the other parts of Outlook, right?
Well, yes, but as said, for Outlook there are not yet adaptive cards as adaptive cards.
Okay. So yeah, let's if you can find it later, let's make sure to put it in the chat. For now, I would like to thank you, Tomasz.
Thank you very much.
thanks a lot for the session. I think a lot of people really loved it. There's great comments in the chat, so that's good.